Thanks for coming back, everybody. My name's Lee. I'm with Booking.com, and I look after getting people to the cloud. Just want to give another round of applause to Dave for his talk. It was really fantastic. Everyone, come on, there we go. I actually worked with Dave 10 years ago in the slow lane, and very much still shifting gears. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the culture and complexity that Booking has been facing on our journey to the cloud. There's one part to this story. It's still the slow lane. Maybe Dave can help us out, take us into the fast lane as we move forward in the future. And really, the problem that we have is one of scale. You can see that Booking have been doing millions of as-booked room nights, actually over 1 billion across Booking Holdings in 2023. And that means that the set of challenges that we have are different to most businesses. And when we talk a little bit about complexity, what we see is numerous siloed areas of the business. You know, we've got the accommodations business unit, the insurance, the rental cars, things like that. And what that means is they've developed their own culture, their own ways of working. In many cases, some of these were different businesses entirely. Rentalcars.com is an example of a company that we acquired and took on. So we had to sort of bring in their culture as well. And we also work in heavily regulated environments. Think about insurance. And with 20-odd years of growth, we've seen a highly entangled and complex infrastructure. You might be surprised to know that Booking is predominantly an on-premise Perl monolith, which is a little bit scary when you think about the scale that we're running at. Still true today. Our cloud migration is ongoing. And the culture that's generated is this resistance to change. We do billions of dollars of business. It works. Customers like our product. We are a major player in the market. And so the question is, well, why should we change? What makes it better? Is it not more expensive? Why do I have to own my own operations? Well, we're a long way from something like Skipper, but that means that there are some challenges here. There's skills gaps. I know how to log onto my server. I know how to restart the service. It's familiar. I understand what's going on. And like I said before, this cautious optimization of why cloud. So predominantly what we have here is a people challenge to overcome. So what are we doing to make life better? I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey, a story, or a saga, if you will. And I'm going to introduce you to a set of heroes, and most importantly, their origin story. And, you know, a friend once said to me, when I was growing up, I always wanted to be Batman, and it turns out I'm Alfred. So I think that very much represents what we're up to at Booking at the moment. So these are our heroes, our internal customers, our delighted developer, our cost-conscious leader, and our empowering manager, the people that we deal with every day. But as I was saying, they didn't always start this way. They were Bruce Wayne, Peter Parker before that. So how do we help them become heroes? I'm going to start the story with the delighted developer. How do we help the developer? Because that's really where all of the magic happens. And the origin story is the overwhelmed developer. Forgive my AI-generated images. So what was overwhelming the developer on the cloud migration journey? It took 2 weeks to get a cloud account. It had to be all manual. You had to raise tickets. You had to go to meetings to say, well, I need this service for this reason. I need this security exception for this reason. And it just put people off and stopped their journey to cloud. Capabilities weren't there. How do I get my traffic from our external service provider to my service? Step in, the cloud engineering team. That's one of the teams. That's the area that I work in. We provided a single point of contact, really great support functionality. So if you were confused, where do I get help? Developer-friendly tooling. We're moving toward CI/CD, great observation, great monitoring, alerts into Slack, things like that. Infrastructure as code templates, Terraform, CDK, for golden path and obvious architecture decisions. And comprehensive training. So you can go and get your certification with AWS. You can do internal training on the booking-specific services, really trying to kind of grow that maturity, because our utopia is this cruising in the fast lane, you know, this self-service, self-owned, high-responsibility model. And we believe that growing the maturity of our developers is the way to get there. Here's an example of some of the things that we did. We're using Backstage inside Booking, and we're developing internal tooling. So rather than raising a ticket, attending a meeting, you go and click a button, and your cloud, your dev account is available in 2 minutes. And you can see what's in your account, you can create a new project, and even today now, a week ago we deployed how much you're spending, what CO2 you're emitting, recommendations on things you can change and things like that. So there's just a portal you can go and see the status of your account and things like that. And so, takes us to the delighted developer, or at least on the way. So you can start developing on day one, no more waiting for 2 weeks. You know where to go for support, it's a Slack channel. You can use the templates to deliver faster. You can just pick up the S3 template and off you go. And it includes all of the booking-specific security guidelines and operation guidelines already in there. And you can get the right training. So, part 2. Now that developers can go off and create cloud accounts and create services, they can also spend a lot of money. So that really worries our leaders. The origin story of our cost-aware leader is the cost-concerned leader. You've given your folks the autonomy and the power and the flexibility to go and spin up services and have a great time, and hang on a minute, your finance team's on at you saying, why are you spending so much money? And most of that was because there was no visibility, no control until the bill landed. And recently, Booking have announced a net zero commitment for 2040 and a net zero commitment for 2030 for certain classes of emissions. So there's also internal impetus and ambition to really be a sustainable option for travel in the future. So not only have you got the cost pressure, but you've got your environmental pressures as well, which I think is fantastic, but it just adds a new layer of complexity to what we're up to. So step in the FinOps team, and I've put in brackets green ops because we've just started doing some of this sustainability stuff, and it's the same model. We've put in some bespoke tooling. So today, if you overspend, you can get an alert. If you deploy a service, you can get a recommendation on what the right sizing looks like, and you can get the support to make those modifications. And the super high visibility if you're, and controls too. So if you're spending too much money, you don't make the changes, you don't adjust your budget, you get called out by leadership, hey look, you're spending £10,000 over budget, you need to bring it in. And if you don't know how, here's an engineer to help you make the modifications to your code, change your infrastructure. Here's an example of one of the alerts that come through. So we connect some internal tooling up to your account. We use some external tools as well, and we trigger these cost alerts. These also go to our operations team to control any anomalous spending. So if it's midnight and a service is span up, a whole bunch of lambdas and it's costing us $1 million, then yeah, we better turn it off. So in this example, our poor project cost owner is spending way more than they should. They get what the project name is, how much they're spending, and some advice on how to control the problem. So some really good maturity coming on here. In fact, a couple of years ago, for our FinOps framework, we relied entirely on an external partner, a consultancy, that we were spending an exorbitant amount of money on. And we've just successfully internalized that, so that we have our own teams internal that deploy the tooling and the guidance for our FinOps. In fact, this year, we saved roughly 20% of what we thought we were going to spend on cloud, which I think is I'm really proud of that number. And they're the cost-conscious leader. They know how much they spend. They can adhere to their CO2 and other targets in the business, and it drives the right behavior. You're getting the alerts right to you. You're getting the guidance on how you're budgeting, and it's all up to the project cost owner or the service owner. To our last hero, the empowered manager. What is the origin story of our empowered manager? Well, the pragmatic manager. We spoke a little bit earlier about the silos that exist within Booking, the culture that existed. They've got their own business goals, grow accommodations by X%, have people book cars when they're booking a hotel, things like that. Those were all business goals that were completely disconnected from our cloud journey. Why do I need to do that? I've got this number to chase. And they were different from their other counterparts. Their goals were different, their needs were different. I spoke a little bit earlier about how we had this Perl monolith in one area. Well, we had this Google Kubernetes cluster in another area, and so the paths were different. Step in the cloud acceleration team. So what we decided to do here was focus on the business-critical, high-value workloads and really target support and capability with those teams. We decided that we partner with AWS in a strong way. They are our vendor of choice. And we always linked it to, well, what are you trying to achieve as a business, and how does cloud migration help you to do that? And so we landed this team, which is a collection of program managers, engineers, partners from AWS, including their solutions architects and their customer success managers. And the idea was to commit time, effort, and focus to a specific migration goal. Dave actually was talking a little bit about this before. They would pick an application, they would define what the size would look like, they would move it. It's kind of that, but with all the complexity that booking has in it. And so that's been super successful this year. We've migrated some highly complex, highly compliant workloads to the cloud in a way that has been really successful. We've always defined what the KPIs are, so what do the response times need to be, what the error rates need to be, things like that. And so that's been really great, and that's something we're going to be taking into next year as well. We are very lucky to have a lot of commitment from our AWS team. This is an example of one of those times. We actually flew out to Bangalore. We've got a team out there that run our fintech products. We've got our own sort of internal bank at Booking. And we said, look, we're going to move one of your workloads in this time frame. We're going to fly out. We're going to sit with you. We're going to get it done. And the happy faces tell you that it worked. So that was fun. Don't drive in Bangalore. So the empowered manager, they've got a whole bunch of support, and now they're out there to self-serve. They can get support if they need it, and their business goals have been achieved. And so, short and sweet, this one. Those are the three key things that we've been up to at Booking to start to indicate out of the slow lane and into the fast lane, to keep stealing Dave's analogies. And what are the takeaways? Collaborate early. We spent far too long working in silos, not discussing what our common goals were, what the value was, having discussions about, is cloud too expensive? Do we need to do it? Talent growth is cloud growth. I was in a talk at reInvent in 2022, and they said, well, if you get over 10% of your team either certified or trained, then it starts to drive cloud adoption in a much more grassroots kind of way. And I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to see the culture drive the demand. Celebrate success. One thing that I've seen is that if you get a foothold in an area that's been staunchly resistant to cloud migration, if you publish in the value and success that you've been bringing to others and demonstrate the right behaviors, we see stances soften over time. And that's been certainly true of 2024. We're seeing much faster cloud acceleration. We expect to spend twice as much in 2025 than we did in 2024, which is a bit scary. FinOps now, we started too late. The bills got out of hand because the architectural decisions were maybe not the most mature, because the guardrails weren't there, and then we found ourselves with a beating stick from the board trying to drive our costs down. So start early would be my advice there. And don't put it all on one team. I mentioned the FinOps team before, but it's a very thin team focused on growing maturity and accountability in the teams. Centralized governance, federated implementation is, I think, the way I would call out FinOps. And I tagged this on yesterday because I forgot to talk about GreenOps, but for me, it's important to make sure that we're maintaining sustainable infrastructure, and AWS is an obvious choice. Our assessment shows that just by moving to cloud, you save 80% of your carbon footprint because they're already doing carbon buybacks, offset programs, they're using efficient architectures. So you don't have to do the work, they'll do it for you. You can get a lot of the way there already, and I mean, I predict going into the 2030s that the European governments are going to start to fine companies against targets. That's my prediction, you heard it here first. And that's it. I want to leave you with just a quote. Henry Ford's good at this stuff, because I think mostly it's about people. You can have your architecture decisions. Kubernetes is a great example, but it's not right for every type of workload. And I think coming together is the beginning. staying together is progress and working together is success. And I see that if we continue this way at Booking, we're going to have a good time. And hopefully I can stand here in, say, 4.5 years and tell you a better story. Maybe I'll look a little older, certainly older than the picture you all saw on DevEx Connect, which is 5 years old. And I've had kids since then, so that's why I look different. So thank you very much. Short and sweet from me. And if you have any questions, then I'm here to answer them. I think Natasha's got a mic. Thanks very much.
Hands in the air for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Luke.
problem,
as
James.
always. Communication styles-wise, what were some of the techniques you used to say what got us here isn't necessarily going to get us there, whilst being sympathetic to what people achieve? The example maybe around the Perl monolith or whatever it might be.
You mean internal into the business to kind of influence the right outcomes?
Yeah,
that makes sense. So I think sharing the success stories has been the major way of kind of leveraging those outcomes, and then other mechanisms, things like the architectural decision trees you've got internally. So if you have a workload that does this kind of thing, then you should use this type of technology. And here's an example of what looked good. And we've also made sure with major stakeholders in the business, because we've been targeting those early, to introduce them to other companies that have been successful in that kind of migration and what the value were. I mean, like, again, I'll keep pointing at you because you're right there. But, you know, hearing the benefits that people have achieved has often been the way. And so if that's not worked, well, here's why it's great. And they're like, no, still not. I think the biggest thing that we're still struggling with in Booking is getting leadership buy-in. So I think getting the right buy-in at a leadership level has been key. So, you know, if you don't believe in the benefit, we're on this journey as a company, and I'm afraid you're going to have to come along. I think a sort of a mix between that kind of impetus and that desire is the right balance. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is on a point that you mentioned earlier around the reductions of cost in the cloud. You mentioned, was it a 30% reduction?
20%.
20%, sorry. Okay. Well, still pretty
Still
good.
not bad, I
Still
think.
pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So could you give some sort of kind of colour to kind of what that 20% reduction kind of was? I assume it was turning things off, moving to more efficient workloads, things like that. But yeah, it'd be good to get an idea of kind of like that 20%, kind of what was it? And then my second part of the question, it's a two-part question.
I'll hold on.
Is, again, you mentioned the kind of green ops.
Yes.
How do you currently measure and monitor kind of your emissions? You know, how do you know that things are becoming more efficient?
It's a really good example, and they are connected as well. So our savings were a mix of things like savings plans and reserved instances. That was kind of, that's like the foundational stuff. That's easy to do, right? We know we're using this type of compute. We know we're going to do this. So we did a bunch of that. We've got like a 60-ish% coverage, something like that. Then there's platform enhancements and changes. So within Booking, we've got like a Kubernetes platform that you can use, or there's a framework that you can use. So we're optimizing those platforms, things like if you're using EC2, having automated turn-off schedules and things like that. And then the other bit is cost avoidance, I suppose, so things like spot instance usage. I think NetApp's a partner. We use a product called Spot.io to automate spot instance scheduling on a bunch of our workloads. And right-sizing is the final bit. And that's actually the hardest bit. So you go to a customer and you say, hey, look, we've spotted this right-sizing opportunity in your application. Can you go and do it? And they go, sure. And then they just don't, right? So within the FinOps team, for a period of time, we've decided that we'd have cost engineers or FinOps engineers, whatever you call it, to just do the merge request and be like, it's there for you, whenever you want to pick up the cost saving, just to get the cost saving going. And the idea over time is that we grow that maturity into the teams. So it's a sort of a heady mix. I'd say something like 40% was that kind of foundational stuff, and the rest of it was a mixture of like cost avoidance, right sizing, things like that. Part two of the question was the green app stuff, right? Like how do you track it? So AWS have got an API that you can pull data from. They've got industry standard measurements of that stuff. So we just pull back the CO2 data. We do some internal work on our own service to say this much CO2 in month 1, month 2, month 3. Next year we'll be introducing carbon budgets. So you've got 100 kilograms of CO2 now. It needs to be 90 at the end of the year. That might mean architectural changes. That might mean more intelligent scheduling, things like that. My hope is that by the time we hit that kind of 2028, 2029, that we can say, we've done everything we possibly can to reduce the carbon in cloud. Now we've got to think about carbon buyback schemes or things like that. No worries.
How have you found the transition for going from on-premise to cloud for the engineers who were primarily maintaining that on-premise in terms of kind of upskilling them and kind of keeping them interested in moving rather than staying to on-premise?
How we found it? Painful, I suppose, is the true answer, but it requires a sustained level of optimism and enthusiasm and different types of opportunities. You know, you'll say, okay, look, here's the training in our internal portal. If you want to do certification, you can go to the AWS training. My team, so I run 6 teams, and 4 of those teams are focused on just helping people get to the cloud. They'll run workshops like this is how you do cloud at Booking. So it's a mix of tactics, and it's basically like what works for the kind of person that's super enthusiastic and's coming to the business and wanted to do cloud anyway, and the person that's been doing the MySQL infrastructure for 15 years. And I think it just sort of depends. We offer a lot of options, but there's a lot of like stand on stages like this, like at different offices at Booking, like cloud's really great, like we've got all this training, and I'm sure people are throwing darts at my face at this point. Like, let's just stop talking about training. But I think it requires that just persistence over time. Now, the other side to it, which is maybe not as fancy to talk about, is like you're just going to see some attrition. Like change is not only in the technology, but it is in the structure of our teams, the type of people that we're looking to keep in the business, and that will mean that people will choose to leave because they just don't agree with the way things are going to be. Dave spoke a little bit about this. We've seen the same thing, right? Like that's just going to happen. I think a lot of other talks that I've seen speak about the shape of your infrastructure looking like the shape of your organization and things like that. So. Retention's funny at Booking because we went through this big hiring spree during COVID, and we paid people loads of money, and now they don't want to leave, right? So it's people want to stick around because like it's a good place to work, the money's really good, and like the rest of the industry's going a bit bonkers. So our attrition rates are like single digit, generally speaking. So I don't know that that's reflective of our cloud transformation journey. I think that's more reflective of like the industry at large and how things are a bit weird. Boris?
Another question?
Hi.
So
you talked about teams being siloed and guessing knowledge being in different business units, was it? Going forward, how do you make sure that that problem doesn't become a thing, even in the cloud kind of transformation? Because even though you're moving to the cloud, those problems could still happen within, I'm guessing, squads of silos and so on.
So there's just a lot less choice, I suppose, is the only way to say it. So it used to be that, you know, the accommodations folks would be like, well, we want to build our service a bit like this, and they go to the data center team and they say, give us 10,000 servers, and they go, sweet, that's 10,000 servers, off you pop, and they just do their own thing. And like the only way to get to cloud at Booking is through our Booking Cloud framework. So you have to use a certain CI/CD tool, you have to use certain observability, you have to use the modules. Like we've narrowed the ability to get to cloud, and there's no way that you can't just use a personal credit card to go and spin up an account. Like it's just not going to work. So I think it's just narrowing the options down has been the way we've done it. Equally, that's caused us some trouble because we've chosen at the moment, much to my disappointment, a restrictive approach. So there are some servers you can use in AWS, and you're just not allowed to use the rest of them. Like the architecture decision tree will take you to Lambda, or it will take you to ECS or whatever, and that's just the way we do it. And I think like over time we're going to see a softening of that, but still within the bounds of what we've decided is the way we're going to go. Control.
We've got time for one more question, if I can see a hand. I can do a quick scope. Dave, you've been pointed to multiple times. You're going to ask a question.
He's going to ask me a hard one if he asks me one. Oh, here we go. Here's one. Yes.
So something that really caught my eye in Dave's presentation was that the delivery delivery performance team, or I don't know how it was called, it was 5 people, 400 developers. And then you mentioned that you have 6 teams to support this. I was just wondering, that seemed like very interesting, how many developer or engineers were needed for the auto-trader migration versus, maybe that's not the right number, I don't know, versus what you're working on.
So you're talking about the teams that we've put together to help the migration and support it?
Yes, yeah. And then build a platform.
So there's 3,000 developers at Booking. I think three plus thousand. So the scale's a little different. And the teams that I operate, it's not the only thing they're doing. So like we have a 5-person support team, 4 cloud enablement teams, which are about 4 or 5 people, and then I've got a FinOps team, which is 3. And those cloud enablement teams are there literally just to get in the trenches and help move people, and that's just a matter of scale. And we want to move faster, so we've invested in a set of people to move faster. But those people are multidisciplined, so they'll also work on platform capabilities and features. I spoke about the modules, so we're developing the Terraform and CDK modules for services too. The portal that you saw, we built that. So we're kind of a mixed discipline. We're working on the infrastructure and tooling to get you there, and we'll get in the trenches with you to get you there as well, because there's not enough work in either domain. It's a really hard job. But luckily, we've got like a lot of fantastic people, and I've sort of brought people along with me that I've worked with in the past as well, so it's helpful. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, and that was it then. Thanks very much for your time. The questions are really good, so thanks.